All right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:31. This is the pre-agenda meeting for the Tom Spencer Board of Aldermen for our upcoming regular meeting next Tuesday night. So this is our June 5th pre-agenda meeting. We're called to order. We have all but two of our members present this evening, and then Miss Moody is battling some back problems tonight, so we are keeping her in our prayers. And I'm not sure about Miss Liz, so hopefully she's okay. We will go ahead and start with an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will, we'll start with the invocation. Father God, we thank you very much for nourishing rain that we've seen today. We thank you for all that is going on in our town, progress that's being made. We thank you for the folks that are here tonight. We look forward to hearing from them. We ask that you be with us as we consider things like our upcoming budget for the next fiscal year. We thank you for the staff that have put countless hours into working to prepare this. And we ask you to give wisdom, guidance, and discernment to our board as we consider this budget over the next week. And we ask you to be with all those that work within our town, keep them safe in their daily work, and help them that they may continue to work towards the betterment of all of our citizens and businesses. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So, board, we have a couple things going on this evening. The first will be a public hearing for our proposed budget for fiscal year 2025 and 2026. We then also have one budget ordinance to consider this evening. And then finally, we will review the agenda and set that agenda in preparation for next Tuesday's regular meeting. All right, Mr. Francis, anything we need to be aware of before we get ready to move into the initial budget discussion?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. We will go ahead and move into item 3 on our pre-agenda meeting agenda for the public hearing for the upcoming 2025-2026 budget year. Mr. Francis, I will open the floor to you for some initial comments.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and members of the board. As you know, the recommended budget was provided a few weeks ago. The recommended budget this year totals just about $5 million. It represents overall a 13% decrease from the current year budget, and in the general fund, a 7% decrease. This was a particularly challenging budget where we are not able to do all the things that we want to do, and we're working as hard as we can to make the best of it while looking forward to the growth that we know is on the horizon. And there were a variety of questions and discussion points that we had during the recommendation a few weeks back. We have some additional information that can be provided. I don't know if you want to go through any of that now or kind of wait until we're on the other side of or any public comments we may receive, and then we can go through that. But
pleasure of the board. Okay, I think that would be good. That way, if there's any clarification or anything like that, that would be helpful. We can do that. All right. All right, so we will now officially open the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year budget. We have 3 individuals signed up to speak this evening. Is there anyone else before we begin that wishes to sign up to speak this evening that hasn't signed up? All right, we'll invite Miss Leslie Talbot forward. As a reminder for folks, as you do come forward, please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes for public comment. We have a timer up on the screens so that you'll be able to see that. And I'll get that up here in a moment.
I timed it at home. I just had to talk fast.
Perfect. All right. We'll hold you to it.
No, don't. Let me do my last sentence. Please. Okay. My name is Leslie Talbot. I live at 308 North Salisbury Avenue. I have been a resident here since 2017. And I want to talk about the budget. And I know that it's a struggle, and you work very hard on it. And I just ask you to consider these things going forward. Keep them in your mind all year long. I've heard recently people say, "Oh, Spencer's going to be the next Kannapolis." It's a lovely town. I've been there. But if I wanted to live in Kannapolis, I would have bought there. I chose Spencer because of its history, its character, and its community that embodies resilience and hope. Because they held on in tough times, believing and trusting that better times would be coming. They held on, their generation. It was that palpable faith in the future and their unique character that drew me to Spencer. I bought here in 2017, and since then, the appraised value of my house has increased 67%, and all I did was put paint on it. And my tax and home insurance was doubled. Our incomes are not keeping pace with the assessments. Families that have held on here for generations are being priced out of a town that they fought to keep alive. It's not right. They are being replaced by landlords and new investors who care nothing about our past or our future, only in the now. And I could speak to that if questioned. We relied on you to grow Spencer wisely, to protect and improve our current residents' lives and property, while judiciously adding to our infrastructure and bringing us new residents. You all tell us of the grant money for new expansions for Spencer and to drawing new residents. But where is the grant money or the bonds or etc., the funding for the families that held on? We need to build on our strengths and our small town character and values and measure that against the new growth. Our locals are struggling to hang on. How much longer can you ask them to hang on without your support, or at least giving them a bonus? I implore you, take another look at the current budget and any future expenditures and avoid rate increases and invest in something, anything that our longtime residents need, i.e. roads, sidewalks, and possible some kind of funding for economically depressed incomes. I think I did it. The park is nice, and I love the idea, but was not on not this park, but the park, Standback Park. That's grant money. It's not costing us anything, but we still had to raise funds. Handing our historic commercial district their homes over to, we've got to bring in, we need streets and sidewalks to sell those homes. And that is part of our unique character. So I implore you, please consider.
Thank you, Ms. Falbert. All right, next we have Greg Bennett.
Hi, my name is Greg Bennett. I live at 406 South Hudson Avenue, and I've been here since 2014. I don't have a speech, and I agree with just about everything the lady said before I got up here. The thing that stood out to me, I get the Salisbury Post, and every municipality in this county has kept their taxes the same, whereas Spencer is the only one that's raising its taxes. And that concerns me. I'm retired, I'm on a fixed income, and my taxes went up 62% from 2022 to 2023, which is a significant amount. I plan on living here until I pass away. The value of my house has very little meaning to me other than, what my heirs may get for it, and that's not going to benefit me in any way. But I'd like to see some control on the property taxes in the town. I've compared property taxes to other municipalities in this county. Salisbury is by far the highest, but we're second highest. And there's municipalities that are much bigger, or at least bigger than we are, whose tax rates are not as significant as ours. So I'd like to see some curb put on what our expenditures are in the future, particularly in the upcoming budget. for those of us that really can't afford much of a tax increase, seeing as our economy looks like it's on the downturn to begin with. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next is Carla Gray.
Hey there, my name's Carla Gray. I live at 211 North Yadkin, and I have lived in Spencer for 22 and a half years. I don't really have anything prepared, but I do have some concerns about the budget. I took extra time this afternoon and actually read the whole thing, and I have a number of questions. I know that you can't answer back right now, but I would appreciate an answer to these because they are important questions. I first want to start by echoing, I, like everybody else, has had an increase in my property tax. We had Rowan and then Spencer and then the little vehicle tax and now another increase. And we're really not seeing a lot of benefit from those tax increases. The roads, the sidewalks, I'm not even going to bemoan all of those things. But there are some concerns I have, and I would like, again, to hopefully get an answer to these. One of the other things that I really want to point out, and I understand that this is a decrease in the budget, but I also want to point out to everybody, I know that you are aware of this, that a lot of that decrease is not a real decrease. It's ARPA funding decrease. And so there's a big difference in what the budget was pre-COVID and before ARPA funding, and then the funding that was gotten for this town through ARPA and expended, and where we're at now. So that's kind of a false narrative to say that we've had a really big decrease in the budget. ARPA funding was never intended to be permanent. So it's a false narrative. But my questions are really, why is there the move from code enforcement to go to the police department? I think that a lot of us have had issues and had questions about code enforcement as it's been lacking. But why is it going to the police department? Obviously, we have a lot of police. So why is that happening? Why is the resource officer positions no longer going to be dedicated? There's over $200,000 when you look at the combined different budget orgs. There's over $200,000 in contracted services. What are those contracted services for? And then my last one really is just a general question, which is more of a, for me, kind of an understanding of where the budget is aligning. You've got administratively that this new park position is going to be under the administrative organization, yet the funding is out of Public Works, and that's just a clarification that I have. Again, I understand that this is a difficult task, and I appreciate that. I would like to see the budget really reviewed as a baseline budget, not a budget that is now without ARPA funding. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. All right, that's all we have signed up this evening. And so with that, board, is there a motion to close the public hearing? All right, a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, public hearing is now closed, and we will then open it up for any discussion or questions from the board and the manager. Well, okay, so I just want to provide a little context because I know there has been a ton of work that's gone in. I think our citizens acknowledge that, and I think we also recognize that the tax burden ultimately falls to our citizens, and we do hear you, and we recognize that when these tax increases are proposed, they impact all of us. Those of us sitting up here, we live in town too, and they impact us similarly. I think the other thing too that we need to recognize is that they do impact different people in our community more so than others, and we are very cognizant of that. I also want to reiterate that our staff is cognizant of that too. So it's not like that is not considered in the budgeting process, or we do recognize that we have to live within our means. One of the things I heard from one of the speakers that I want to reiterate We do recognize that we want to maintain the charm and the small town character that the town of Spencer has, but we also recognize that as a municipality, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so there has to be some balanced growth to that. And that has been our goal and our strategy to make sure that we have that balanced growth to where we are bringing new folks into our community, that we are promoting new businesses, new industries, things like that, but that we're doing so with minimal impact to the character of our town and ultimately minimal impact to the citizens that have lived here, whether it be for 4 years or whether it be for 22 years or more. The challenge that we face is we're in a very interesting spot right now. Those of you who know, kind of as alluded to, the situation with the economy, but we've been very fortunate in the past several years with a good economy that we've attracted a lot of attention from folks like developers and things like that. And we have lots of projects like that on the edges of our town that have recently annexed in and come into our town. And a lot of those are larger industries and things like that, the cost to serve is actually going to be lower than residential development. That's a good thing. Some may say it's not, but for the longevity of our town, it is a good thing. And for a tax rate, it's a good thing. And so for our individual citizens, when it comes to your tax bill, that's a good thing. That good thing has not happened yet. And I think we all realize that, but we see signs of it. We see the truck stop going in. We see we get updates from Mr. Blunt of the industrial and various development projects that are happening. We have development on Hawkinstown Road. All of that stuff we are going to eventually reap the rewards of. An example is China Grove. You may have seen in the paper where with the Macy's facility that they have, I think it's something like $275,000 in additional revenue.
Couple million.
Couple million.
71%.
Okay. All right. 71% increase. So you think about the town of Spencer, if our tax revenue was to increase 71%, what that's going to do for you as individuals and us as individuals, it means our property tax rate would go down because we now have more revenue coming in. The expenses maintain or stay the same roughly. And so what that then means is ultimately to balance the budget, tax rate goes down. There are a lot of municipalities, and I think Spencer used to do this, where we kept the tax rate flat year after year after year. And what we did was in a lot of years, we relied on either fund balance or a lot of times we were actually charging residents and then we were putting money back into fund balance and building up the fund balance. The reality is when we do that, we're not actually giving back to the community, right? We're charging you for something in one year that you're not getting that particular year or even maybe the next. So what we've done is made a strategy to where we're actually trying to keep the fund balance at a reasonable level, but not continuing to build it up and build it up and build it up so that we don't have to we don't have taxes higher than they need to be. The reality, just like what was mentioned, insurance, right? Your property insurance has doubled. It's done that for all of us. It's the same thing with the town. Our property insurance increases, and there's a good bit of property. We've had to add additional staff. One of the things that we heard a year ago was, a little over a year ago, there was concern over gunshots and things like that. There was concern over drug activity and stuff like that. And we responded. We responded by adding additional officers. And you'll look, our firefighters and our police officers, they're here tonight. They showed up in force, and I think they showed up in force because one of the hard things and the hard realities of this budget is that we cut out a potential, at least a proposed budget, cuts out a increase to their salaries that would bring them up above what the market average is based on our salary study. That's a tough pill to swallow when we have a staff as good as our staff that we have here today. And so, some of them are sitting here on the other fence saying, well, we wish you would raise the taxes to be able to do those merit increases. The reality is this has to be a compromise. It has to be a compromise between our community, our staff, and us as a board. And so what's been presented, it's not ideal for anybody at this point in time, but it's the compromise that we've gotten to. And we hear you, and we'll go back and consider, and when it comes to Tuesday, what we vote on or what we ultimately end up doing, is going to consider all of that, and it's going to consider each side of it. what I want to point out though is Spencer doesn't, we as a town, we define your tax rate. We don't define your tax value. That's Rowan County, and ultimately it's based off of market conditions. And so market conditions 2 years ago set what they appraised our properties at. And it was high, right? We saw it go up. Now I've heard from some folks are seeing their appraisals and things now being less than what they were 2 years ago. That may be the case. If the economy turns down, for sure, it would probably be the case. But the reality is we have to base our rate off of what the appraised value is. So what we do is we look at what our expenses need to be each year, and then we have to make sure that we have revenue to match that for a balanced budget. If we don't, it means we have to do one of two things, or both. That's cut expenses and raise revenue, and that comes by raising taxes. We are projecting less of a sales tax increase because of that economic downturn, based on guidance we've gotten from the state of North Carolina and the League of Municipalities. We've projected less growth in sales tax than we've typically seen. And so that means in order to keep up with rising gas and rising insurance and all of those things that are increasing for all of us at home, that are increasing for the town as well, we have to find a way to offset that. So that comes in cutting costs on one side, and unfortunately, this year comes in raising taxes slightly. So that's where I get back to all this development, right? So if we're to increase our tax revenue by 71% like China Grove did, we're not having this discussion. The discussion we're having is we're reducing your tax rate by X%. Unfortunately, it's not this coming year, and it may not be next year. But within the next 2 years, that's when you're really going to see these projects coming online and that additional tax revenue. That's when we get to start talking about reducing tax rates. And so, I sat up here at the beginning when we first started this process, and I said, there's no way we can go up on our tax rate. And so that's what we worked from. And that's what the guidance we gave staff to work from was find a way to make this happen without increasing. And y'all worked. I know there were some midnight nights and some really late nights working to get this information together, and staff providing the information, but ultimately what came out of it was the best recommendation that y'all thought for us now to consider based on the input that we've heard from the community, the feedback we've gotten from staff. But that's the recommendation. So that's what we're going to have to consider. So, this is not something that we just take lightly. It's not something that we're just in it for a money grab. Unfortunately, this is actually a tough year when it comes to budgeting. Part of that is, as Mrs. Gray said, our ARPA funding is now gone away. The ARPA funding was a great thing. It allowed us to do a lot of projects that we wouldn't have otherwise gotten to do. It allowed us to basically supplant funds, use funds that we would have used for staffing for the purpose of some of these projects. So we've gotten to do some really neat stuff. Now we're having to take a step back and say, all right, we've been able to be really aggressive with these projects. We do need to slow that down a little bit and take stock of it. But what I want for folks to come away from tonight is, what's being recommended doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to any of us, and I know it didn't feel good for staff. It didn't feel good for staff to have to propose a tax increase. It also didn't feel good for staff to have to cut some of the things that we proposed to cut. My commitment, as long as I am sitting in this chair, and I think those around me would agree, our commitment is to make sure that we're providing you with the services that you need to be a thriving and successful community, that we're making sure that we're carrying forth the priorities of the community, and that we're doing that as good stewards of the tax dollars that you are putting in. So, all that to say is, if we want to cut beyond the 2-cent increase, if we want to not raise taxes, there would have to be cuts that would happen. And my question, I guess, to the citizens is, what do you want us to cut? Because what I heard tonight was not cutting stuff. What I heard was more money's needed for roads, more money's needed for a variety of different things. Well, the reality is, beyond taxes increasing, there's not. Beyond things like bonds, and I heard that. Those are options, but ultimately that's going to cost our citizens more. And so that's something we have to really work out. I've talked enough,
Mr. Mayor,
but yeah, go ahead.
I've got some comments I'd like to make. I've spent a lot of hours looking at the budget that was prepared by our management and staff to make the best use of the funds that will be available for the operation of this town during the next 12 months. I don't remember if I raised my hand when asked if it was the consensus of the board not to increase our tax rate a few meetings ago, but I realized that when the federal monies ran out, we'd be faced with hard decisions. This town's been able to do a lot of great things in the last years, and we've made progress towards some lofty goals. Much of what has been accomplished has happened because there are people in our area who believed in the town of Spencer and who've been generous in putting their money in projects that were identified. We have used OPM, other people's money, for some of what you have seen and a lot of what you see. I'm sure I'll leave out someone, but we've received grants and gifts from the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, from the Carolina Thread Trail, from Fred and Alice Standback Foundation, from the Cannon Foundation, Friends of Rowan, the Rowan County Arts Council, the Margaret C. Woodson Foundation, the North Carolina Railroad, the Robertson Foundation, a federal community block grant, grant funding from the EPA Brownfields program with Central Carolina Council, land and property from Three Rivers Land Trust, and the Yadkin Historical Museum Foundation. Spencer Presbyterian Church has made space for our community garden, and the list goes on and on and on to acknowledge the many individuals and families who have stepped up to help us grow. We've used that OPM, other people's money, to build a lovely park with features that our citizens said they wanted. We've won grants by adding things to our projects that make Spencer a desirable place to live. We're working to bring more amenities to the community to encourage growth. We've talked about summer programs for youth here and events in our new park space. It's been suggested that we delay adding an employee to do an active living program to the town. Our manager and staff were sent back to the drawing board to try and find more cost savings to keep our tax rate lower than the projected 2-cent increase when the numbers for the budget came up short. I pulled out my 2024 Rowan County property tax notice, and I saw the evaluation on my property is $227,531, and my tax bill for Spencer was $1,376.56 based on 60.5 cents per hundred. When I take that same evaluation and calculate the new amount with a tax rate of 62.5 cents per hundred, my tax bill becomes $1,422.07. That's a difference of $45.51 more. And if I divide that by 12 months, that's $3.79 a month added taxes. You may not remember this, but a few years ago, we, the board, lowered our tax rate, and I was chastised by a longtime resident who said you never lower the tax rate. I feel that we need to continue the progress we started when I was elected to serve the citizens of Spencer in 2019. I feel that we need to support the employees that work for us and pay them what they deserve. And we need to continue to provide the best service we can for our citizens. Yes, roads, sidewalks, potholes, those are problems. We know that. Additionally, we should honor those people who believe in the future of Spencer and have made our growth possible. I know that soon we will have additional investments in our community, which will increase our revenues and bring in additional taxes and grow our tax base. But until then, I support a modest tax increase.
Thank you, Ms. Sledge.
Thank you.
Board, at this time, is there other input, other questions, other comments?
Yeah, I'll Mr. May, if I may just offer a couple of comments. First of all, it's nice to have you all here tonight. That's good. I do think, number one, I don't think our priorities are, I think there's a risk that we could leave here tonight and the next week and think that somehow there's a division. There's not. Everything that you've said, I absolutely agree with. 2 years from now, this will not be a problem. 3 years from now, perhaps 12 months from now, this will not be a problem. Ms. Gray is absolutely correct that ARPA funds are partly responsible for why we're having this conversation. I mean, I think we all agree. I think the question is, how do we address the next 12 months? How do we address this particular situation, right? But also, I do think we have to keep things in silos. Leslie, I absolutely agree. Our roads are not good. I've talked about Fifth Street, I don't know how many times, right? But as as we talked about with the community walk-up a few months ago, those are sins of 60 years of neglect. It would take millions and tens of millions of dollars to fix that. It's not going to happen next month, next year. In a decade from now, we'll probably still be having this conversation. It's just that bad. And that's not your fault. It's not our fault. We have to fix what 60 years didn't fix. And that's the unfortunate truth, right? No, sure. I'm just saying. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's something we'll have to do really small bites, right? And I also think, when I moved here, and I went to school in Spencer, but I didn't live here until 2010. When I moved here, my house was 40% less valuable than the same house might have been sitting in Rockwell or Granite or Faith, because no one wanted to live here. This was a depressed community that had been frozen in time since the shops packed up and left, right? That's all changed, and that's all great. And I've said it up here before, I don't think I ever saw that happening 12, 15 years ago. It's wonderful that it's happened, and we all deserve it. And the folks who've been here for 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 or 80 years, you really, really deserve it because you stuck it out and you made it work, right? So we have to remember that the momentary issue is not a reflection of where we've been and where we're going. Now, with that said, I'm not going to support a 2% increase, not 2%, a 2% increase, just because I told you last year that I was going to 60, but I wasn't going higher. I'm not. Now, what that means, unfortunately, is, as you said, the only way to reduce expenses is to cut services. I mean, there's no other math to make this work unless we're going to sell T-shirts or something, which I'm open to. That's cool. I like T-shirts, but or sell some, world's finest chocolate or something like that. Or sell fruit like the band, like I used to do. That's right. Yeah, sell fruit. So, that's the reality here. Also the really unfortunate reality is that staff with Mr. Franzese and this board before I was up here, and our chiefs and our employees have worked really, really hard to turn organizations that were not in great shape 5 or 6 years ago into first-class organizations that keep you safe. And we've got to ask them to kind of take it on faith that we can give them something that they maybe thought they were going to get, maybe in 12 months or 24 months from now. So we've got to find a way to balance all of that now. So hopefully they all stay and hang out with us for a little while longer while we figure this out. Those lead to tough conversations. And I'm glad you guys are here too. And we see you, we value you. And having 4 kids in my family here, I know you guys are going to keep us safe. I appreciate what you do. So we've got to find a way to balance all of that. We talked about some ideas in the last meeting, and I hope maybe those have stuck. I did raise the issue of that position, maybe not doing it with Parks and Rec, not because we don't need it or don't. I know we've talked about that for 2 years, but it's a situation where it's a position that's a hypothetical. I know maybe we're interviewing people. I don't know who those are. I don't know where they're from. I have no idea. Honestly, I'm glad I don't know. But we've got to make sure, to the extent we can, we don't raise this rate, and at the same time keep those folks back there happy, because I want them to keep us safe. I know that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a little bit of a setback, but I don't think there's a division amongst us up here. It's just about how do we get through this bump in the road, and then we'll be off and running.
And to that end, I think, what we are working from is a set of priorities that we developed several years ago as a board. And we've all been in lockstep with making sure we're moving those priorities forward. And those priorities were what we heard from our community. If you recall, back in early 2020, I guess, right before COVID. We had the session at North Carolina High School, and we had the community show up. And the things we're doing now are the things that our community told us they wanted. And so we're working from that set of priorities. I know you brought up, do we hold and not move forward with that Parks and Recreation position? I'm of the opinion that, we could do that, but also I'm of the opinion that we've got to be really careful about stepping back from all the progress that has been made over the last several years. Because if we, I think I shared with y'all at one of our strategic planning retreats that we did an adage that not to look back because we're not going back. we're moving forward, and so we have to be, what I don't want to do is backtrack, to take steps back from where we were headed. Now, all that to say is we need to be very cognizant about if we are adding new positions. But now keep in mind, with some of our other departments, we've frozen some positions. So it's a balancing act between all of that. What I'm concerned about on the recreation side is we've got all these new facilities. We've heard it from our residents too. What about the program for that? And my concern is you're going to have facilities sit for a year and no programming is happening and things like that. And then we're going to be right back at the situation where our residents are asking, well, why aren't you doing anything with these things? So I do think that position is important. My opinion is we need to move forward with it because we planned, it was part of the priorities, it's been part of the priority for the last several years. We had planned it in this year's budget. And timing wise, we're at the point that it's likely going to happen at the beginning of the upcoming budget if it's approved. That's an important thing. It's an easy cut. It's easy to look at it and say, that's a nice chunk, let's cut it. But I think the detriment to some of the progress that's been made, I think will be noticeable as well as sure. I hear you.
It's just, I mean, this is one of the toughest things. I said, y'all voted me in and gave me 2 more years, so I've got 2 more years of budget stuff to struggle with, and this is not easy. I'm telling you. I mean, we have staff members who've been here till 3 in the morning trying to work through it, trying to come up with answers, and I can't tell you how many hours I've spent with it. I can't even keep up with it. But anyway, it's tough, and I know that. I live on fixed income. I'm retired. I have Social Security, and I don't have any other income from a partner. So, I mean, I see your point. There's just no easy answer.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, I know I talked about it, I'm sorry, but there was a comment made about how our tax rate compares to somewhere like Salisbury or something like that, or other larger communities that have a much lower tax rate. There's a reason for that, and I hear you, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. And the reason why is in much larger communities, because they have so many more people and so many more businesses and industries, their tax revenue is much, much higher for the services that they provide. And so, we're a much smaller community with limited industry, limited business. And so what we need to keep our community safe and keep our community running and functioning, the unit cost is higher than it would be in a much larger city. That's across the board. All small towns are going to have that challenge. There's a reason some of the other municipalities haven't raised rates. Salisbury struggled. Salisbury had to make some major cuts. Rowan County had to make some major cuts, and they pushed off some projects that we've seen. East Spencer, our neighbors across the way, they did a huge increase last year, so that they didn't have to this year. I don't even remember, it was 20 cents? It was for a 20-cent increase, roughly. That's huge. But they did that for some of the same reasons we did, so that they can have a full-time fire staff, just like we did. And so we've tried to balance that out, not do this big a one last year. But all that to say, trying to compare us to other communities is a little tough. It gets a little jaded. It's a little cloudy with how that works. I think, and I've mentioned this before, what we need to look at is what is the return on investment that we're providing to our taxpayers. And I know they want to see better roads, they want to see better sidewalks and those sorts of things. What I also want folks to understand is that money, it could come from your tax dollars. And I guess in a way it does at the state level, but the reality is the money for roads and sidewalk repairs, that comes from the state. And the state gives us the same amount of money that they gave us over a decade ago. And so what do you think's happened? Material costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up. So we are able to do much less when it comes to road repairs, road repaving, sidewalks, that sort of thing, than we were able to do a decade ago. And so if you want to see that, I'll walk alongside either Raleigh, I'll write letters as well, but we need to advocate for more funding through our power bill. That's where the money for the roads is going
Yeah.
to come. But in the absence of that, what we as a town are doing is we've said, all right, we have to package these resurfacing. So you'll see resurfacing every 2 years, roughly, as opposed to every year like we used to be able to do. Because we want to do as much paving as we can at one time because we get a better price from our contractors. What we've just talked about for public works is in those off years, rather than not doing anything, we're going to invest some money into doing things like pothole repair, uh, uh, cold sealing of cracks and things like that. It's a bandit, but at least it's something to keep the roads passable until we can get them resurfaced. So it's not like we're just sitting back and we're not doing anything. We're trying to move the needle forward while still being able to make sure that we're being good stewards. So it's a challenge. I think that's the message.
Mr. Mayor, Board, and citizens, I just have a couple of things that I want to add to these discussions tonight. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here. And a big special thank you to our fire and policemen for being here. I'm glad all of you showed up. I'm a retired public employee. I know what it's like when salaries get frozen and raises were taken back that you were expecting, especially when you're raising a family. I don't like it. When there's been a promise made and a commitment made, I think we need to do as much as we can to honor it and keep it, especially for our employees. We probably have, and I'm going out on a limb here, but I think I'm probably right. We probably have the best staff in Rowan County. I'm not sure it's not the best staff in the whole state. We have turned Spencer around, and it's not been just us that's done it, and it's not just been our board that's done it. The groundwork was being laid before we got on here. It's been a cumulative process. But throughout all of this, I've lived here in Spencer my whole life, and I know taxes. I don't like paying high taxes either. None of us do. I don't think our taxes are high compared to what we get. I talk to people from all over the state because I have a lot of former students and friends that live in places. They can't believe the services we provide. My sister lives in Asheville and she pays a whopping big amount of taxes. They still have to have their garbage carried off and pay for it. They have to pay to have all their yard debris carried off. She just cannot believe when she comes here and sees that our town picks up bulk items and does our garbage weekly and all of the brush and debris. That's something that most communities don't get without any cost. And I remember even in Spencer, at one time we had to pay to get any bulk items taken off, and you had to come up here and pay them something, then they come and look at it, and then they're going to call you and tell you how much more you have to pay. That was not fun. So we've got a good system right here. But the thing that really makes me proud, I'm on news sources all the time, and I'm all the time getting updates from Newsbreak and Smart News and everything. And one time I saw an article that showed up, it said, fastest growing and wisest investment in the municipality. Guess who was number one in the whole state? Us. And just think about your property and how it has grown in value. Now, it's happened everywhere, but ours has really, really increased. So you all are a little bit wealthier there if you are a property owner, so that's a good thing. But I remember when you couldn't sell a home in Spencer. I remember when I would go to gatherings and there were people from other areas in this county, and they talked down to us and would dare to talk about Spencer and Northland schools to me. Well, that was a mistake. And usually I had to leave. Usually I got drug out by Coach Secret before I said any more. But, you know, we don't have to defend Spencer anymore. And for those of you that have lived here a long time, now we have people praising us and wanting to know how we did it. Now, I still know that we're responsible to our citizens. but we are also responsible to our employees and to our programs and to this wonderful park system that we have. So I still hadn't 100% made up my mind, but I know which way I'm leaning, and I think most of you can probably that know me know. And you know, I look at this, and it's not when you do like Pat did and average it out over a year. That's less than a bag of candy you buy at a store. I mean, and I think it added like $7 or something a month to a $250,000 house in taxes. That's less than a pack of cigarettes. I got to think about stuff like that. As like I said, I'm looking at it also from the public employee perspective. Because if you're working for the public, you don't get rewarded often for doing a good job. You just get more work to do on the same salary. And basically, that's how it works. So I'm looking at it from that too, and I want to keep every employee we have. I don't want them being siphoned off by Davidson County, Mecklenburg County, and Salisbury, or any other place. We're competitive now, and I want to stay competitive because we got top-notch people. And I'm not saying we haven't always had top-notch people, but they've been stable. We're not losing as many as we used to lose. When we first came on here, how many vacancies did we have in that police department? A lot. And basically a volunteer fire department. And you don't attract industry and developers and everything by having a volunteer fire department. You've got to be able to offer the protection. And I feel safe in this. I don't ever worry about being attacked. And I'm old now, and I'm an easy mark, but I don't ever worry about it. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I don't worry about it. I mean, our streets are clean. They might need to have some holes that need to be patched up, but we've got these good people walking around, and I've never felt intimidated. You know, but we could have gone the other way. So I'm leaning towards supporting this, and because I know what's coming in 2 years, and I think we'll be able to stop it or even decrease it.
But remember, the citizen who said you never decrease your taxes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Can I say something?
You absolutely.
First of all, everybody up on this board is an optimist. We got into this thing being optimistic about Spencer's future. Like Patty and the rest of you talking about, at one time we couldn't sell a house in Spencer. I'd love to have got out of Spencer at that time, but I couldn't because I couldn't get true value in my house. But we've done, and we say we, I'm talking about everybody in this room, have done an outstanding, great job as far as that goes. If you look at our budget, we have studied it, our biggest source is our employees, our police department, our fire department, our maintenance department, and our staff. And that's what makes us happy. If we didn't have good employees, everybody would be upset. But at the same time, I'm looking at it as an open mind, like some of these people express. I've seen a lot of communities where the tax rate has grown so far and so much that they can't afford living. And I'm concerned about that. There's not everybody, you know, Spencer is kind of a depressed town where, you know, at one time you could afford living here and getting by, but everything has improved, and that's cost everybody that cost things for everybody else. So I am concerned about that. As the mayor says, we've taken gambles in the future, and look at what we've got. It's amazing. If you told me 8 years ago we'd have all this, I'd be a new fire truck, a new garbage truck, a new beautiful town hall that we're in right now. I wouldn't believe it. I think it's amazing. We do have to take gambles. But I'm questioning myself whether maybe we need to take a pause maybe this year and wait and see what's going to happen. So at this time, I'm just expressing my opening that I might consider holding back on the expenses for this year. But at the same time, that's why I'm here. I'm listening to every folks here in here. But the main thing, like I said, what makes a town is our employees, and I appreciate what y'all do. Thank you.
If I may say, Mr. Mayor, board, staff, and most of all, the residents of the town. And being a resident here of Spencer for 20 some odd years, we are all affected by this. It's almost like it's a double-edged sword. We need to make sure that we keep these services that we have with the quality of staff that we have, because ultimately our number one priority is the residents, is the town. But in order for the town to continue to flourish, and hearing what my constituents up here were saying, I can look back in the past, and of course, I probably wouldn't have thought that we would be where we're at today 10, 15 years ago in reference to the town hall, the different amenities that have taken place here in town. And if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, some of the roads, and I hear the concerns of the residents, some of the roads, the responsibility of that is not just on the town of Spencer, it's also on the Department of Transportation. And I know we have addressed some of those. There is still some work that needs to be done. And I mean, there always is going to have to be work to be done in order for the town to continue to flourish and not die. So it's not an easy decision that has to be made because it affects us as well.
Mr. Francis, any clarifying remarks or anything like that at this point?
What I'm happy to share based on, I guess, some of the questions from last time, and this is published within the agenda packet. There were questions on a few different items, and so I'll just roughly give a few highlights from that. But again, there was the questions around our ability to implement the pay study. First of all, I have a chart published in there that kind of shows a few different things, and it shows it by department, and it shows it, and if you're on the packet, there's a public hearing notice published in the packet, and then the next page after that is where this information is. So currently, for the recommended budget, there is a proposal of a flat increase for all full-time staff of $1,200 next year, which is an amount that's roughly kind of mid-range on our DI program. And so for some that represents a little less than a typical year, and some that represents a little more, and some it represents about what it average. But it's a flat rate for everybody, no matter what your current salary is. And of course, that is a best benefit to as a percentage to those who are on the first few stages of our pay scale. That the cost of that is about $49,000, and of course, every time I say a cost of a salary increase, you can add 30% to it for the other benefits as well. So that is currently funded in the recommended budget for a total cost of about $64,000. That's compared to if we were able to implement the full market study that we've discussed several times. That would have a price tag of about $200,000 in salary changes. Add the 30%, that's up to $263,000. That was pretty quickly not going to be able to be 100% implementation. We evaluated a number of scenarios through the budget process to figure out, where we might be able to land, and we were working towards some sort of partial implementation, whether that meant, phasing it in various ways throughout the fiscal year. As an example, this chart shows an incremental phase in that moves the increase along at 4 increments through the fiscal year, about every 6 or 7 pay cycles, so that by March, we've gotten folks up to where we want them to be. That comes in at about 60% of the cost of the full study, at about 124,000, 125,000. Again, add the 30%, that's up to 161. And again, ultimately, it was not an option that we were able to recommend without further changes to our revenues. And so where we landed was about, for including the benefits, about $64,000. And so the next column just shows, as a comparison, it says additional needed to fund incremental. It shows the additional cost if we were to try to go from that flat 1,200 plan to the incremental plan. So that, for example, is a $75,000 additional, and again, add the 30%, it comes into about $98,000. What I've done though is it's shown as a whole, but it's also shown by department. So you can see all of these scenarios by department. It's in there and published, and again, it shows because the 30% was being totaled along the bottom of that chart. It's also totaled on there on the side, so you can understand either individually or as a whole what that would look like. So that's just one additional piece of information and context in case that's helpful. The active living coordinator position that was funded in the current year budget but has not yet been filled, but we are in the process of doing so. But again, there are not been anybody hired or any offers made, although we're close to that point. That the cost of that position in next year's budget is, when you include all the benefits for that position, is about $63,500. Another piece of information that's published in here based on the conversation from last time was a conversation around board member stipends. So that information is published in there. That's a total cost for the current for the coming fiscal year of about just under $25,000 for the whole year for all of the elected officials, and so that's there for just for informational purposes. Of course, it's elsewhere in the budget document, but this was just to try to consolidate. We also had a little conversation about our bulky waste program and kind of concern over whether it was an issue of something that was driving up our costs or people taking advantage of it. And the analysis came out that it's actually has a cost. From a tipping fee perspective, we were able to isolate that the trucks on Thursdays that would be using that, and the year's tipping fees for that program is about $1,758, or about $146 a month. And we also programmed in the staff time involved. Of course, that's not an extra cost. It's just a representative figure of the allocation of their time. But we have a crew of 2 that typically spends 2 to 3 hours once a week on Thursdays collecting targeted items. They don't go up and down every street looking for it because those items have already been identified through the garbage collection process. But we estimate the staff time cost of that program to be just under $4,000. We did not identify fuel expense as a significant cost, although you are making a trip to the landfill and back. But we determined that wasn't a cost that really needed to factor into this analysis. But when you add that together, you're just under $6,000 for the year for what we do with bulky waste. We believe that the cost is less than of course, the value of the benefit provided by keeping the community appearance clean and providing a higher level of service so folks aren't having to figure out other ways to dispose of these items. There was questions about our Ruffey Home Senior Center partnership and the senior programs that have happened over many years, but in recent years done in partnership with Ruffey Home Senior Center. We currently work with them to provide a minimum of 2 catered lunch events per year, including entertainment. And as available, they also are working to provide other activities, whether they be fitness classes for seniors or educational or other social or other types of programs. In May, we had our most recent event. There's usually one in May, one in December. There were 100 seniors signed up for that event, and so that's what they prepared for. They had about 75 or 80 people actually attend. So unfortunately, there were some folks that didn't come. Don't really have an answer as to why, or it's unfortunate, but for what they prepared for, it was about $20 a person for a full meal with drinks and dessert, entertainment, and door prizes for those in attendance. Staff believes that this is a good value for what's provided for those seniors, for those interactions a couple times a year, for all they get. The Ruffey Homes team has they've done a great job of bringing their team out to make it smooth and enjoyable. This is something, again, our history of volunteers making things happen in Spencer. For many years, this program happened with volunteers putting it together. And that's become more challenging in recent years, and this was a great opportunity to partner with our local senior services nonprofit to make that happen. And then the other information that I provided is related to our grant programs that go through our Community Appearance Commission and Historic Preservation Commission related to the Salisbury Avenue corridor improvements and our residential historic preservation program. You can see over the last several years how those programs have increased in the amount of funding that has gone towards those historically. Each of they were originally known as residential and commercial facade grant programs. They had pots of $2,000 each and maximum matching grant awards of $500. And in the fiscal year 22, that increased dramatically by an increase in the town contributions towards those programs. We started contributing $10,000 for each rather than $2,000 and increased the match, the maximum match to $2,000 instead of $500. And we also, in that first year, had an infusion of additional grant funding from Duke Energy of $25,000. So we went from one year having $4,000 to dole out to $45,000 the next year. But then it kind of flattened after that. The last few years, it had been $20,000 each year. And then in the current fiscal year, during the budget approval process last year, that went from 20 to 16,000, taking it from 10 to 8 in each of those grant programs. Now, typically, we have at times struggled to get enough applicants to be awarded all of those grant funds. You can see the next column in there. In any given year, we are roughly awarding about half of the grant funds that are available, and then we're roughly having those awarded grants go to completion on when somebody actually does the work and turns in their receipts for reimbursement. It's been about 60 to 70% of those awarded grants have, especially over the last few years, have gotten to the completion. So that's just some information. There was a question about that. You can kind of see how that program's worked over the last few years. In the recommended budget, the recommendation is to for next year at least to return that to the more modest sized pot of $2,000 for each of those programs with max award of $500. And you can see that again historically. In fiscal year 21, we awarded half of the awarded $4,000 2,000 was awarded and 2,000 was expended through reimbursement.
Question, yeah, and I think we talked briefly about this last time. Ms. Gray asked about the contract services, because that is a pretty significant amount. It's about 8% of the budget. What, but just for those playing along here at home, what is that?
Sure. So it's a variety of things depending on where, within our administrative budget, that's how our planning services that we provide are done via contract services. So that's one example within the administrative budget. We also have elements like in our public safety departments, and even in our administrative, sometimes it is referring to some of the software that we're using, or some of those platforms. In public works, it's mulch grinding. In the library, we have some in contract services for some of the events when contracting out of folks to help provide those activities. In the proposed recreation budget, same thing, some level of contracted services for programming and activities. But in general, those are some of the things that are covered in that.
Those services vary from year to year.
To some, I mean, not greatly, but to some extent, they do.
Now, I guess when we figured, or you figured, or staff that figured, this is the lowest we can get this figure.
Yes, I mean, but what you see in the recommended budget is really with there's actually some things that we have reduced. We have reduced our planning services hours in some cases to try to create some savings.
Engineering services was cut.
That as well. Yeah.
Peter, can you address for our citizens why code enforcement has been moved to the police department? There seems to be some confusion about that.
So for several years, code enforcement has been a function provided through our police department. The recommended budget includes an adjustment to move our code officer to a sworn law enforcement position. Our current code officer happens to be a sworn law enforcement officer and works with, has a reserve status with our police department. And the idea is to provide some flexibility. It's also an ability to get a few more hours a week of services. The code officers on a 40-hour a week schedule. Our sworn law enforcement officers are 42 hours or a week, or 84 hours every 2 weeks. That's about 100 extra hours of services a year that can be provided. But the key thing is the flexibility that would be possible through that position, being able to respond if needed while on duty as a code officer and some of those other capacities.
Can I say one other thing? Yeah. For information for our public and everything else. The proposal is 2 cents, and we all know this on the board, but just for information, for every penny, we're deducting $38,354 out of the budget. So with that 2%, we are cutting a little over $74,000. So that's what we're trying to cut if we wanted to get the budget back to the previous year. So that's just information, good information for you to know.
Peter, can you talk through, I know you've gotten the summary, talk through the kind of cumulative example cuts that were made? Because I think there's a question of, have you cut? The answer is yes, we have cut out of the proposed budget. And so can you kind of walk through what some of those proposed cuts are so folks can understand that?
Sure. So, and again, kind of going through by the budget unit of the department. For the recommended budget, the current recommended amount for governing body is about $205,000. That budget includes, again, historically, quite a few of our the grant programs we've talked about, but they also include things that we've got to have, like accounting services for our audit, legal services, dues and subscriptions to entities like the League of Municipalities and Central Line of Council of Governments and the Chamber and that sort of thing. And they also include the fees that we pay to the Rowan County tax collector. $35,000 of that budget is that. So, and of course, every municipality in the county contracts with the county for that service rather than hiring their own person to be a tax collector. That fee has increased over the last several years. We've been on a 5-year plan of getting the fee to be 1.5% of our revenue, tax revenue that's collected. We pay that back to them in this fee. It's gone up 0.15% each year for the last several years. So that amount has gone up over the last several years.
Mr. Brent, can I make a comment on that
Yes.
too? And I know that looks like a big number, and relative to our budget, it maybe is, but for 35,000, less than a full-time equivalent position, we're getting a whole department. I know none of us like a tax man, so to say, but they do a phenomenal job, and that's a deal for the services they provide. So I think that's I know it's a big number, but I promise you, if we try to do that ourselves, it would be our entire budget.
So I
No,
recently,
yeah.
as part of the Mayor's Association that I'm a part of, I recently was on an email chain where one mayor in the eastern part of the state was trying to find out if they were considering taking theirs in-house. And so we started getting all these numbers back and forth from folks, and the 1.5% is a very reasonable rate. I saw rates upwards of a lot of them were 2.5%, and I saw a couple that were almost 5%, which I thought was highly erotic. But yeah, it's reasonable.
So again, about $205,000. We, to get to the recommended budget, identified about $14,000 in cuts. That included putting a pause on the mural program. We have, for several years, had public art happening here primarily through grants, but we have also budgeted some town funding to help with matches and kind of get it started each year. But we've typically brought in grant funding that exceeds the amount needed to actually do the work. But we have typically funded as kind of our own start each year about $5,000. $12,000 between both of the grant programs we've been talking about. Reduction in the events line, specifically about a $4,000 reduction in what we're contributing towards Winterfest. And part of that is due to we're providing more now in terms of in-kind services with the park. We're going to be providing facilities that will hopefully reduce some of the costs on the organizers of putting that event on, and a reduction in our available contingency of $10,000. That amount really was, I considered it modest to begin with. At about the last few years, we've had $15,000 or $20,000. Right now, it's recommended for next year at $5,000 in contingency. So that's the what if in the budget. That's the when something pops up, it's our ability to say, okay, here's an opportunity, and we've got this set aside that we can make use of. So the contingency for next year is being recommended at $5,000, just in an effort to keep things as minimal as possible. And moving on to our administrative department, we've identified $32,000 in cuts to get to the recommended amount, ranging on reducing training and travel budgets, reducing funding to. We typically like to budget an amount for HVAC maintenance. For this building has 6 units that if one of them goes out, and we've already had to replace one of them because these were existing units that were upfitted, put back into service as part of the project. One of those goes out, it's about $20,000 to replace it. And so rather than having to scramble, we were fortunate the last few years that we kind of budgeted that amount just in case it was, if needed, it was there. But that's an example. Looking forward to this budget, you know what? We're not gonna budget that much. We're gonna maybe we reduce that amount by about $10,000. And if something's needed, we'll have to figure it out when the time comes. We also, and it's not reflected as a cut because of the way our budget software works, but we were hoping to fund a part-time position to continue that public art program that I talked about. We were not able to recommend that at this time. That's worth about $11,500. Our police department, about $24,000 in cuts. Again, things like travel and training, and but also reducing the amount we have on some of our contract services, like including the having some funding available if we need to do a code enforcement abatement, reducing that amount, reducing the amount of tasers that we were planning to replace. But the most significant area for police was a frozen position with benefits that's worth almost $60,000. 2 replacement vehicles, that's about $105,000 that we're just going to have to hold off right now. In the fire department, there was about $65,000 reduction in some uniform items and some PPE bunker gear replacements. There were some building maintenance needs at the fire station we would have liked to have been able to do. We're going to have to hold off on those. We reduced that amount. And then some maintenance on our reserve backup engine. There was an amount reduced there, but again, the total is about $65,000. And then in our public works department, there was a mower replacement that we're going to hold off on for a year. That's worth about $14,000. And then there was a budget request related to some maintenance on our garbage truck, our older garbage truck, that we had cut that one out, but we were able to fund it with savings in the current year budget. And there are a few other items that aren't necessarily on this list. We've actually worked through some of them in the last few meetings where we've identified some opportunities in the current year to take care of a few things, and we're able to. The departments had several items that they didn't even request, and so they're not showing up as a cut. But those are some of the examples.
What was the? I know the number, but just so they know the number. I know it from March when we started planning this to remember you told us last month that we had to work down from. What's the difference? Well,
we were looking at about $1 million gap that we started with and that was just raw. Those are raw numbers. It was kind of the pre-request kind of stage that before everything was finalized of just going on available revenues, keeping everything the same, and looking at all the possibilities of requests.
The other thing I think we need to point out, right, and I think Ms. Gray brought this up, right, is the ARPA funding. We don't have that. So, as far as these cuts, you're going to see cutting some things, but there were some additions, I guess, over the past couple of years with that and staff. We've done things like that. I think the thing that we need to keep in mind with what are the increases that are proposed in the budget that maybe are offsetting some of this through the increase, proposed 2-cent increase. One of the big things, and I think I had kind of forgotten about this, I want to make sure our board and definitely our citizens remember this. There is still additional, this coming year, additional fire staff for the entire year, because I believe, if I'm correct, we had budgeted basically for 3 positions for a full year and 3 positions for a half year. Is that right?
that was that transition happened in the
Last
current.
year?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we had fully funded positions in the current year we're in for fire. One of the big changes though with fire budget is the new debt service for the new fire truck. Is certainly that was one item there.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may just make a comment to the board, and Mr. Franzese and staff, and as I said last week, I think we all said this last time we were here, we appreciate what you've done. You guys have moved a mountain in 6 weeks. That was a big difference 6 weeks ago. You guys have got us down that we need some fine tweaking, so well done. Regardless of how you slice it, we're asking someone on faith to take a haircut, right? To tighten the budgets. I said it last time we were here, Mr. Mayor. I know you were not here, but just for your benefit. I don't want to put pressure on anyone up here, but I know how I feel. We need to tighten. And our stipend's not. You just heard Mr. Freddy say it. The whole stipend for all of us total is $25,000 for the year. That's it. But as a good faith, I think we've got to tighten what we get. If we're asking everyone else to tighten, we've got to tighten. We can take that as low as y'all want to go. But I don't want to put any pressure on anyone. But if to me, that's leadership and good faith, and we can't sit up here in good faith and ask these folks to do, regardless of how we all vote. Someone's taking a haircut, right? And are not getting maybe what they'd hope they're going to get. We've got to do the same.
Well, I've already donated mine.
No, and you have, yeah, and you
For the
have.
next 3 years.
Yeah.
And you have, and that was the documentation from Ms. Prentice today. We didn't know that, so we appreciate that. In my thought is that at least a third, and that's $7,000-8,000 I think by my math over a year. And we can go no lower if y'all want to, but I don't want to put anyone on.
Well, I agree with what you're saying because, number one, I didn't even know there was a stipend when I ran, so that was a pleasant surprise. And you're getting a good bargain for your money. But I agree, if everybody else is taking a hit, I want to take one too. And we can talk about how much work on that.
Yeah.
I have one other question, because Ms. Gray asked about the resource officer decrease. They won't be dedicated resource officers now. Is that what
so there's not a change in function. Right now, our compensation and classification plan shows it shows a separate classification for school resource officers. What we're recommending doing is not keeping that as a separate classification. It's just an assignment. Same thing for detective. It's not a separate classification, it's an assignment. So then our rank structure of police officer, corporal, sergeant, etc. functions as the classification, and whether you're assigned to patrol or investigations or school resource officer, that's what that's about. So it's not we still have 3 school resource officers funded in the budget. Those are grant funded. 2 of them are funded at 100%, including salary, benefits, fuel, training, etc. And one of them is at about 85 or 86%. And just so folks understand, that represents the funding that we get from Rowan and Salisbury schools, and actually they get other grant funding that they pass on to us and others. That revenue for the school resource officers is programmed in at $252,000.
Well, that was my next question, is because if we made any changes to their duty, would we lose some of the revenue from the schools?
No, we certainly value what our school resource officers do and our ability to be in the schools, and we've got them here today, and but no, so there's no change to the function. It's simply adjusting the comp and class structure to follow the rank structure.
Thank you.
Or any other questions? Obviously, we'll have our work cut out for us on Tuesday. We appreciate all the input. Thank you citizens that came out, staff, and again, thank you for all the time that's gone into budgeting this cycle.
And I guess what I'll say or ask, and it sounds like maybe we are not quite there. We can either come back Tuesday with an adjusted budget ordinance. Of course, there's already a recommended budget ordinance. If so, the question is, do you feel like you want to consider an ordinance on Tuesday, whether it's as recommended or with requested changes that we can bring back, or is Tuesday going to be more of another workshop opportunity, and then we would need to have another meeting, to consider voting on a budget ordinance? So that's kind of where we are in the process.
I think we need to think about some of these things and Tuesday, do another, rundown of where we're headed, and then I don't know if we'll be ready to vote on Tuesday.
Is it possible by Tuesday to have the current proposal as you have, and then a potential secondary ordinance that could also be considered that would show what it would look like at a 0% tax increase?
Well, it could, but we would need some direction on, how to achieve that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which I think would provide a lot of
Actually,
information already.
what did we say, 70,000 that we're talking about?
You need $76,708.
Yeah.
If we cut the recreation person, which is $63,547, that would leave, still need to reduce the budget $13,161.
I'm not in favor of cutting that position. I think we have to have it. We've invested too much money into the parks and the things that we have here. One of the things that you said, Mr. Miller, is that you would like to see more people use our parks and the library. If we had somebody who was working with those programs, we might have an opportunity to have more events.
We've also heard, the need for youth programming
Yeah.
in the community, and that was, I think, an intent of the position as well to help with that. I hear you. I'm concerned that if we don't, that we may never.
So if we don't cut the position, is there any way that we can revisit the salary amount for that position?
I mean, I think you're splitting hairs at that point, right? The question is, what can you cut to make a meaningful enough cut that's not going to increase the tax rate?
I know that puts you all in a tight spot in terms of the folks who are waiting to hear from us, whatever that means. Again, we know nothing about who, right? I mean, we know nothing.
So I think you should give an update where you are. And I think you're to the point you're ready to extend an offer, but you pause.
So I'm happy that I could share in a way. Yes, so we've gotten the process through multiple rounds of interviews to, we were at the stage of being prepared to make an offer. We have let the folks involved in the process know what's happening with this and the budget discussions, and that we need more time, potentially through next Tuesday's meeting to kind of have a determination of whether we're going to be able to move forward. So that's kind of where they are, where we are with that process.
But you feel really good about the candidates that currently.
We had an outstanding candidate pool, and we've enjoyed interacting with candidates, and I think Spencer would be served well by any number of the folks who are interested in working in our organization in this capacity.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just make a comment on that, I guess from my perspective, a splitting of the baby, as it were. I think as a matter, and you probably know where I'm going to come down on this, as a matter of good faith, I think we owe them an answer as quick as possible, right? I mean, because they no doubt have jobs or other opportunities, right? I mean, I think we need to resolve it, because that's the elephant in the room with regard to making this budget or not, in my view. I mean, 2 cent, leave it, whatever it is, that's where it's at. My perspective on that, knowing nothing about the candidates, wanting those programs, knowing, and when we did the community walk back in November, we got several pointed questions. You have these wonderful facilities. Why is no one using them, right? And those are absolutely valid. But from my perspective today, for the next 12 months or the next 6 months or whatever we're looking at, what the budget's going to be for the next foreseeable future, we're asking these folks out here to either open up their wallets and pay more taxes, and or we're asking the folks in uniform out here to get a little bit less than maybe what they thought they were going to get. But we're adding this position, and I know we didn't have the mural position. She's been with us for a long time, right? And we're not going to be able to do that right now, at least as it looks. I just think it's a matter of who we have and who we know versus a hypothetical. And I'm just running the cost benefit for me. The benefit that position may bring, or probably will bring, may well, and I'd say probably will be offset by the detriment of some of these nice folks may get offers elsewhere, and they may go elsewhere. And all the work that we've done, and all the work that Mr. Franzese has done, and all the work that our chiefs have done to get these organizations where they need to be, may begin to be undone. And I'm really worried about. I really am. I'm really worried about that. My thought is, as much as I want that position, and I absolutely agree with you, I think there's always a risk. Anytime you back up from doing something, there's a risk that it doesn't get done, right? We see that all the time. But from my perspective, is that I'm really worried about the negative impact will offset, surpass, or exceed the benefit, and then it becomes a detriment, right? And so I just, in my heart of hearts, I believe, really honestly, not even related to whether we raise the tax rate or not. We're still asking these folks to forestall that income benefit that they deserve. And if we're going to do that, I think we have to follow it up with not moving forward with something else that we really want to do. That's a big chunk of what we're asking the community to invest in. So I just, in my heart of heart, I believe we just can't move forward that right now. And maybe, I know we had a similar conversation last year at this time. We said, well, we'll do it in January. With getting everything done and getting it posted, we're now back around a full year. And I understand that may happen again. I get that. Maybe not. Hopefully not. But as it sits right now, I really believe we just can't take that risk that doing a good thing actually creates a back end bad thing, right? And I do believe those folks need that answer. They deserve that, whether we can do this or not. And obviously I'm one, and if you all feel differently, let's talk it out, and we'll accept it. But I'm just, and we will, right? Because ultimately we do need that position. But these folks also need what they deserve, and we're not going to be able to give it to them fully. And I think that has to come with some balance, right? And that's just my thought.
And I hear you, and I think you're exactly right. Except for the fact we're in a position where, right, it's all about compromise. It's all about figuring out, here's my concern, right? As we've said for several years, we need to do this. We've added facilities using OPM, other people's money, not our taxpayers' money. They've gotten a whole lot of free infrastructure through other people's money. But now there is a time we've got to, as a community and as taxpayers, step up and actually fund what's going to help activate those spaces. Because to me, people want to see a return on their investment, right? That's one of the clearest ways they're going to see a return on their investment, where they can come and participate in a concert, a free concert at the park, when they can walk in Standback Forest and have somebody that has done programs, when they can take their kids to activities and things like that. And those are things right now that, by and large, there's not a lot of that happening. And so, to me, I think they get more bang for their buck with that type of position than maybe in some other areas. It's more visible. Maybe they're not being more, but it's more visible. It's more tangible. It's something that they can experience and touch and realize they're getting something for what they're putting into it. But I hear you, right? Because I'm totally with you on making sure we're taking care of all of our staff. And we've frozen some positions in some places. I've got a big problem though continuing to kick the can down the road, that's where we lose momentum. That's where we backslide. And that backsliding is what really concerns me.
Well, you got that top-notch, recreation committee ready to go.
Right.
And, I mean, we've got a super committee.
A number of our grants have been based on the fact that, you know, we will
Yeah.
have advisory people, we will have program, the points that we've gotten through some of those grants have been contingent on some of the programs that we plan to offer.
Okay, I think everybody here agrees, and everyone might think that I'm against this recreation person. I'm not.
No, I mean, we've heard,
Yeah.
I think everybody's
But,
for it. The
okay.
question is when.
All right, so the next question is, okay, how are we gonna make up the 76,000? That's the question. It's not.
Well, all right, so I think the bigger question is, we know how we're gonna make up 76,000. Well, I mean, yes and no.
Okay.
Right? I think the bigger question here, and this is something that ultimately the board is going to have to vote on. I don't have a vote in it, so it's gonna be up to y'all to decide,
Unless we got.
is,
And you'll be the tiebreaker.
are you gonna vote on a 2-cent increase? Are you gonna go vote yes for that? Or are you gonna say, no, we want it to remain a flat tax rate? I mean, and I think that's what it's gonna come down to,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's what you have to know kind of, and I think we know where generally folks stand on stuff. And so the question that Peter wants to know is, are you prepared as a board to go into Tuesday to have that vote? You don't have to be unanimous on it, right? You don't. It's okay. I know we want to all be unanimous on it, but we've sat up here and we've talked through this, and we're doing the work that needs to be done and the discussion that needs to be done, but ultimately it's going to have to come down to a vote at some point.
I can't agree with that, but it's just like Peter said, he's already put this person off 1 week. Definitely think we got to give this person an answer this coming week.
I agree.
If we don't, we don't look very good.
Right.
And Peter, it's a reflection on Peter, unfortunately, because Peter's from these people. So I think we owe Peter an answer Tuesday night.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, you're
Now,
right.
Thinking about it like that, I think we'll be ready. Be time.
So the question is, will you be prepared to vote on an ordinance that's before you on Tuesday night? Either yes or no.
So let me read that ordinance.
Might change your mind.
It's a pretty long one.
So, I think I would be, if it's an either or, because if you reduce the position that we've been talking about, if you don't hurt, well, Leslie's gone, she can't hurt. If you reduce the CAC and HPC 3,000 each, if you cut the Ruffy Homes in half, and if we're addressing us, which I think is $6,000 or $7,000, that's $78,000. And my math's rough, but that's pretty close. And I think you said 38.3 times 2 is 76.6.
Yeah.
So the way this would go, I think, is if you're voting on the ordinance before you, if you vote yes, then it's a 2-cent increase. If the majority votes no, then what comes out is you have to provide some additional guidance to staff as to what you want them to do to get to a budget. And I think what you talk through might be what.
Repeat that again, so I'll have a look.
All right. Well, yeah. If you cut the coordinator position, where that's what 63.5 or 63.6.
63,546.
Okay. If you cut the 3,000s from the CAC, and the HPC, that's 6,000.
Right.
If you cut Ruffy Homes in half, that's 2,000. That's reflective of the data Peter had about the meals and the cost. And if we're addressing that roughly third or whatever that we talked about earlier up here, that's 7 or thereabouts. Again, rough math, that's $78,000.
Yeah, right. A little more. That's a little more than it is.
Now, just keep in mind,
I know.
every one of those things that you said has a direct and tangible benefit back to the community.
No, I know. I like that at all, right? We all would. I mean, no, you're absolutely right.
But again, I think one of the key things we discussed, how does it relate to the majority of people? Necessarily just to a small segments of people as far as they go. And that's I think that's where we're trying to please as many people as possible.
Well, everybody can take part, for most folks, in the different recreational programs. Ruffey Homes, we talked about the senior population that we have. We have a large senior population. We can take advantage of that and experience that. We have a large historic preservation district, the largest contiguous district in the state. Folks that could potentially take advantage of that. So these are programs that, by and large, most of our communities can access. I mean, you look at, you can see it both ways, right? So here is what I would propose to you is board to, you got the staff's recommendation. They put a whole lot of time and energy into providing a recommended budget to you. I would recommend that you consider that and vote on that on Tuesday. Be prepared to vote on that. Pending the result of that, it either passes with the 2-cent increase and the fee increases that have been proposed in the budget that's proposed, or if it's voted down, then you go back and you provide guidance to staff, and it's likely that we will have to have a follow-up meeting, should it not pass, to then allow them time to present a new budget. But at that time then, if it were not to pass on Tuesday, you would know what you need to tell candidates for that new position. I mean, I think that's the reasonable thing to do.
Sounds good.
Make sense.
It's a lot. Thank y'all very much. Board will vote on it on Tuesday. The next thing, we're going to move on unless anybody has anything else budget related. All right, we're going to move to an item on this year's budget. And so, Peter, I'll turn this over to you. It's for consideration of a budget amendment related to replacement of a vehicle that was totaled in a wreck.
Yes, and Chief Fowle is here, of course. We talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago. We were working on finalizing the budget amendment for it, and it's ready for you tonight. But we had a vehicle that was identified, that was involved in an accident earlier in the year, and combined with insurance proceeds and some available funding within the existing police budget, we are able to, if this budget amendment were approved tonight, then Chief Fowle could move forward with replacing that vehicle with an available 2025 Ford Explorer for a cost of about $41,000, and then after the tax title and upfit, the full cost is about $51,649.
And so, as a reminder, we can let our public know that this was the result. It was bad guy's fault that this
Yes.
wreck happened.
Yes.
And so it's unfortunate that it happened, but our police officers were doing what they do in protecting and keeping our community safe. And unfortunately, it was just the car that was sustaining those damage. So, board, you have budget ordinance 24-10.021, police vehicle replacement before you. Are there any questions on this item? And if not, is there a motion to adopt this budget ordinance?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All opposed? And that's approved unanimously. Thank you all. We will now move to review of our June 10th agenda for Tuesday night. We will do the call of order. Mayor Pro Tem will be presiding on Tuesday night. Do we have a volunteer for the invocation?
I don't mind.
All right, Mr. Muhammad, thank you very much. Then Mayor Pro Tem will do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have additions and deletions and adoption of the agenda. I see we have 2 additional items, I believe, Peter, that you want added to the agenda related to mural art. Is that correct?
Yes, and Anna, could you share the update on this one?
I don't
have a lot of information on it. It was a last minute addition that Sky was hoping to add. If not this month, then it could be pushed off to next month. But she just asked that we put it before you all, and she would be on Zoom on Tuesday to speak about it. It is added to the agenda.
But the idea is that we have two concept art approvals for murals that do have existing grant funding available for them.
All right, board, you wanna receive an update on these items on Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. All right, board, I would suggest that we add that as item, I'd suggest we add that as item 9, right after item 8, which is where we're adopting a budget ordinance for a Woodson Foundation grant, specifically for murals. Does that work?
Yep.
So these would be items 9 and 10. Okay. All right. We do have a number of recognitions for end of year student awards from the town for both North Carolina Middle School, and then also for student in fourth quarter for the high school and the elementary school. Mayor Pro Tem will be acknowledging those students. Do we have any other recognitions that we need to make at Tuesday's meeting? Okay, hearing none. We'll have public comment, and then we'll have our consent agenda. Right now, the only things on the consent agenda are approval of our minutes from May 8th, the pre-agenda, our May 13th meeting, and our May 22nd budget workshop. So as we go through tonight, if there's anything else you want to add to the consent agenda, please let me know. And then item 8 will be the budget ordinance for the Margaret C. Woodson Foundation grant. I suggest leaving that as a regular agenda item since Sky will be with us. She can give an update on that. Okay. Next will be to consider adopting the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board bylaws. I assume that Mr. Morris will be there to provide an update on that on Tuesday. Okay. And then we will consider adopting ordinance 25-10, which is the upcoming fiscal year budget that we talked about. All right. And then of course what we mentioned with the mural, the 2 mural concept art considerations. And then beyond that, we have our departmental reports. So relatively light Tuesday. Some major, light in length, significant in decisions.
Do I
put it that
understand
way.
correctly that you're not gonna be here?
Yeah. You do.
You do understand.
Okay.
Did you plan that?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
So in your
Work has
absence,
called me
who's the
away.
tiebreaker?
Work has called me away.
In your absence, who's the tiebreaker?
In my absence, there's not a tiebreaker. Mayor Pro Tem, everybody gets to vote. And so in the event that there is a tie, we will have to reconvene and vote again. Unless someone decides to, well, actually I was going to say abstain from voting to serve as a tiebreaker, but that's not, we have to.
If you abstain, it's the same as if you vote yes.
Unless you don't show up. I'm
Well,
not encouraging that. Show up, please. All right. Departmental reports, town manager report, and then question comments from the board. Anything else? Okay. So with that, is there a need this evening to go into executive session for any reason?
I did have a comment to make about an event that will be happening before
Tuesday?
Before Tuesday,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, go ahead and do that.
And I hope you all got the message earlier this afternoon, but the Department of Transportation has invited public officials throughout the town to participate or to attend a ceremony dedicating the Senator Elizabeth Dole Highway. And that's tomorrow, June 6th, at AFM Trolley Barn. So if you got the information, there is an RSVP on it. I'll have that RSVP to be there, so anybody else who is able to come is certainly welcome.
And I know that the Salisbury delegation they had a group that was in Raleigh earlier yesterday.
Well, the chamber, I think.
Yeah,
group,
they got to meet with the lady, so that's exciting and well-deserved honor for her.
Another announcement that's gonna happen before our meeting. This Monday, 5 to 8, community table, community 10 table down here at Fleming's. From what I understand this time it's going to be a fish fry. So it should be great. And, the price is whatever you can pay. Now, the standard price is $15 and it's collected, that's per person. But anyone is invited, whether you can pay that, more, or nothing. And there's no stigma, no one knows who's paid or anything. But it's a wonderful thing that's bringing the community together. So please try to come, and Pinocchio helps with it too. They have put together this, I think this is number 3 or 4. It's always the second Monday of each month. So try to come.
All right, board, we've reached the end of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right, all opposed? Please don't oppose. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. Yeah.